Rav Avram Yitzchak Ben Chaim Shul, which is the first yurt site for my father. So it's a big honor to be allowed to speak tonight on behalf of the family, and also Motzei Shabbat will be something specific with Shiurim given in Israel and in England. So we're delighted to have that, and that's why this ended up being a lovely way to open the completion of the year, I guess. I don't know, that doesn't really make sense, open the completion of the year, but open the events leading to the first yurt site. So hopefully my mother passed on to you the source sheet on the WhatsApp group. So if you didn't get it, I'm getting lots of no's. That's lovely. Okay. All right. Sorry, Pat. Sorry, Miriam. Sorry, Hillary. I can't see anyone else's faces, so I'm assuming you may also not have my source sheet, which is a real shame. So I'm going to ask you if you can, I guess we'll hopefully be able to let everyone listen, and I'm going to try to admit people because I see people are trying to be admitted. Okay, hi, Mom. Mom, a lot of people don't have the source sheets. You're on mute, so I can't hear you. Mummy, you're muted, so we can't hear you.
Sorry, it's my fault. I think I forgot to send it to everybody. Didn't I send it to the group? No. I had a bit of
You can do it now, Mum, if you want. You can still send it. Just forward it. That's all you have to do.
Okay, okay.
Okay, so I'm just admitting everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, so the story is like this. Mummy, I already introduced that this is the Shiur, which is opening the yurt site events for Dad.
Oh, that's very nice. Thank you.
I'm going to start off by reading a paragraph from a book called The Road to Character. So if you could just follow with me while I read this, and then hopefully my mum will be sending you the source sheet through. Okay, so if everybody's ready. David Brooke is a journalist and a researcher and a lecturer in university. He wrote the book The Road to Character and a number of other books. He himself is a good old Jew, Baruch Hashem, working for the New York Times, and has a son as a lone soldier in Israel. So one of the reasons that I decided to open the Shiur with a paragraph from David Brooke is because I think it will help us lead into what I'm going to teach you tonight, work with you on. And it goes like this. Recently, I've been thinking about the difference between the resume virtues and the eulogy virtues. The resume virtues are the ones you list on your resume, the skills that you bring to the job market and that contribute to external success. The eulogy virtues are deeper. They're the virtues that get talked about at your funeral, the ones that exist at the core of your being, whether you are kind, brave, honest, or faithful, what kind of relationships you formed. So I would like to say that many of us, Baruch Hashem, have wonderful resumes. I'm sure people have attended university, people have led successful lives in the professions that they're in. Still people trying to get in here. If anyone else can let somebody in, because it just went away.
Can I just say to everybody who's on the Rosh Chodesh group, I've forwarded it to you now, the sheet that Rachel was talking about.
Gabby Stone wants to know if it's possible to share the link to the source sheet here. Yeah, that would be a very good idea, since I don't have it on the... I'll see what I can do, as they say.
What did you say about the sheet?
There's a source sheet that should be coming to you.
When?
My mum is sending it to you on her
Hadassah,
WhatsApp
I don't know
list.
if you're on my... I'll try and send it to you on WhatsApp.
I've got it.
Got it?
Thank
Everybody
you.
got it on WhatsApp?
Okay,
If anybody doesn't have it on their WhatsApp, maybe they can help each other and send it to each other if you're friends.
That's on Michael's phone, and I don't know.
You got it, Hadassah?
I say...
And I'm not on the Rosh Chodesh WhatsApp group.
Yes, I've sent it there, yeah.
But Sandy may not be there, Mom.
I'm not on the WhatsApp group.
I'm trying to send it to you personally. I hope I've sent it to the right Hadassah.
Mommy, maybe you can send it to Rabbi Portnoy. Maybe he can put it up.
Could you send it by email?
Yeah, I've sent it on WhatsApp.
Maybe you can send it on email. Okay, so I'm just going to keep going just to say that many of us have beautiful virtues on the resume, but really, especially since this is a Shiur, which is about a yurt site, I also wanted to say that the eulogy virtues are very important, and the eulogy virtues normally go deeper. What type of person are you? How honest are you? What type of relationships have you formed? And many of us would say during our lives, perhaps, that the resume virtue was most important. But I think we can all agree that when we, Ad Mea V'Esrim, go to Shamayim, we also want to feel that people appreciated us, people respected us, people thought highly of us. And therefore, the eulogy virtue suddenly takes on more of an emphasis and suddenly becomes much more of a focus. One of the books that helped David Brooke write his own book was The Lonely Man of Faith. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with The Lonely Man of Faith, but it's written by Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik. And what's specifically special about this book, and it's also in his book Family Redeemed, is that he compares Perek Aleph and Perek Bet of Sefer Bereshit, and in his comparison of Perek Aleph and Perek Bet, he decides to compare the creation of Adam, which is in Perek Aleph, to the creation of Adam, which is in Perek Bet. And you'll find, if you go and study it later on, that what is written about the creation of Adam in the first Perek is completely different to the creation of Adam in the second Perek. It's a very odd situation. In Perek Aleph, Adam is created sort of with one unit with the Eza Kenegdo, with the Nekeva, with the female. And in Perek Bet, Adam is created, and from his rib is taken Chava, Ishto, the woman who is formed from him, who becomes his partner. So already, just in terms of how the man is created, we see that there's a completely different account. And there's different discussions about that, which we're not going to go into tonight. But why are these two different opposing accounts mentioned? So the reason that David Brooke brings it up is because he wants to say that Adam 1, the Adam that's found in Perek Aleph, perhaps represents the Adam that wants to build, to create, to produce and discover, to have high status, like perhaps our resume virtue, whereas Adam 2, which is the one where Chava is taken from his rib, so Adam 2 is a different person. He's an internal person. He's someone who wants to have certain serene inner characteristics. He wants to know right from wrong. He wants to sacrifice himself in the service of others and in Hashem to Hashem. He lives in obedience with a transcendent truth. And his soul, his inner soul, wants to work with Hashem. So David Brooks brings these two examples of the resume virtue versus the eulogy virtue, and he compares it, if you like, to what Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik has written in Lonely Man of Faith about this idea of Adam 1 being a very clear-cut character who's in this world to do, to create, to make, to be out there, and a little bit more of the external resume of success. And Adam 2 is this serene inner character who wants to work with Hashem, and his the transcendence to serving the truth of living in God's shadow. So he brings these two types to show that basically, even though Bereshit brings these two prakim to give us these two styles of Adam as we know him, basically, it's not that there really are two different Adams. We all realize that this is talking about one Adam. But what we're talking about is the life that we each have. Each and every woman who's sitting here, inside of her has the will on the one hand to succeed in life, the will to be professional, the will to have a beautiful home, the will to bring up a beautiful family. And at the same time, each and every one of us has a spiritual side, a connection to Hashem, and a sense of closeness to God. So we all balance within us, Adam 1 and Adam 2, we all balance within us resume of work and resume or eulogy virtues, the things that say what they say about as a character. So I think that all of us are really living with that. That also brings me back to my father, because I'd like to say that my father, on the one hand, was very interested in academics. He was very interested in developing himself, constantly studying, constantly learning. At the same time, he was highly spiritual, and he was very occupied with the concept of truth and the variety of religions and conversing with different religions, but he never was mevater. He never compromised on what it was to be a religious Jew. So whilst he was involved in politics, whilst he was involved in yoga, whilst he was involved in opera, we were very clear about at home the values that my mother and father held in the house that they made for us. So we were very, I think we were very privileged to see one person encompassing very, very diverse presentations, and we were very privileged to see his love of England. He was very much a man who appreciated England, the fact that England had given the Jews a home. He very much appreciated the Queen, and I know that you've all gone through a big shake-up recently with good old Meghan there, doing her bit to keep us all on our toes. Yes, of course I'm following it from here in Israel, and my daughter and I have scandalous conversations about what is this girl doing to the monarchy. But nevertheless, yes, my father was very, very proud to be a British Jew. And I think that we can all recognize what British Jewry stands for, and the commitment to the traditions and the commitment to the generations, and the United Synagogue Shul, as it always provides services and committees, and even this shiur that I'm giving, I know is part of a much bigger picture that many of you, Baruch Hashem, are committed to being part of, which is an incredible thing. So what we do see is that all of us seem to have this balance within us. Now, what I want to bring tonight is I don't know if you know me well enough yet, but I love Agadot, and Agadot are the stories that turn up in the Gemara. So it's not anything to do with halacha, it's not anything to do with mitzvot. The last time I was in England, I gave a different Agadah, and this Agadah I felt was quite relevant because, and I'm just checking the time, it's now my time, 10:15. Okay, so I felt this was quite relevant because this is actually the story of two gentlemen, two rabbis, one being Rabbi Yochanan and the other one being Reish Lakish. The reason I bring this story is because what you'll see is about to happen seems to be quite a simple story, but as we go into it, I think you'll see why this is relevant to what I brought up at the beginning of my shiur. So, opening up. One day, Rabbi Yochanan was washing in the Jordan River. This is a very, very famous story. I'm sure it's somewhere in the back of your minds. You may have heard this before, but if you haven't, I think it's well worth getting to know it. So Reish Lakish sees that Rabbi Yochanan is in the water, and he jumps in after him. Rabbi Yochanan sees this masterful man jumping into the water, and he says, your great strength is really suited to the toiling of learning Torah. Now, just for your information here, Reish Lakish seems to have had different lives. Okay, Reish Lakish was a bandit. He was considered to be very strong, very tall, very large, and he had dedicated his life to maybe even being a gladiator. The Romans may have had him around being a gladiator, but he's really a Jew. There is even some discussion, if you look at some of the sources, if they come through to you, there is even perhaps a discussion that he was once learning in a Beit Midrash, but then with the times in Rome being so difficult, he may have actually gone off the derech, he may have not stayed religious, and left the Beit Midrash and become a bandit in order to support himself. So Reish Lakish seems to have had some sort of interesting background, and Rabbi Yochanan is fascinating. If you look at different sources about Rabbi Yochanan, he is meant to be an absolutely beautiful man. Okay, we're talking about someone who was his face was so beautiful that the sources can't even describe the beauty. It's so rare. There's a whole source about pomegranates and a flask and the sun shining through and the rose petals on the edge of the goblet, and the sun catches it at a certain hour, and it's such a unique beauty that there's no real words to describe it. So perhaps we're seeing Reish Lakish. It's known that Rabbi Yochanan may not have had a beard, so it's possible that Reish Lakish thinks Rabbi Yochanan is a beautiful woman in the water, which means that maybe Reish Lakish had designs upon this person, and probably gets a nice little shock when he jumps into the water and discovers it's actually a man and it's actually Rabbi Yochanan. So So what we have here is Rabbi Yochanan in the water. We see that Reish Lakish jumps in after him. He says to him, Rabbi Yochanan, wow. Rabbi Yochanan says to Reish Lakish, your strength should be used for Torah. And as you can see, sharp, straight away, Reish Lakish answers him, doesn't stop for a second. He says, Yofyecha hagadol matim lenashim. Well, you should just know that your beauty should be used for women. Okay, so both of them are immediately giving each other advice. One sees the strength of this man striding into the water, jumping across, and the other one turns to him immediately says, what do you mean my strength should be used for Torah? Your beauty should be used for women. It's wasted in the world of Torah. Amar lo Rabbi Yochanan immediately answers him back. Im tachzor becha midarkecha eten lecha et achoti shehi yafa yoter mimeni. Well, says Rabbi Yochanan, if you will come back to the path, if you will become a chozer b'tshuva, I will give you my sister to be your wife, and she is much more beautiful than myself. Okay, so that's crazy, okay, because this man has just met him for a second. How many of you would be giving away your sister after meeting someone that plunges into the water? So it must be that Rabbi Yochanan understands in a split second that he's looking at a person. The Reish Lakish is something very unique and very special. Perhaps he knows Reish Lakish from a previous time when Reish Lakish was, in fact, in the Beit Midrash, or maybe not, and maybe he just recognizes this strength that Reish Lakish has, and immediately offers him his sister. And we hear immediately Kibel alav, the very next words, Kibel alav Reish Lakish lachzor b'tshuva. At that moment that Reish Lakish has jumped into the water, challenged Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan challenges him back. Kibel alav Reish Lakish lachzor b'tshuva. Reish Lakish chooses to do tshuva. The kasher atzah lachzor lesfat hanahar k'dei lekachat et kelav lo yachol haya. And that minute that he decides to go back to the riverbank to get the rest of his weapons, he suddenly is not able to. Rabbi Yochanan limed oto. Rabbi Yochanan teaches him mikra, text, chumash, mishnah, the oral Torah, v'asa oto l'adam gadol, and makes him into a great man. So what we see straight away is that Rabbi Yochanan was not wrong. He was able to identify in Reish Lakish an incredible ability to learn, and he was right. This man became a great Talmid Chacham. He's in the Beit Midrash. We have a lot to get through, but I do want to point out one thing. What we can see is Reish Lakish is a person who takes the plunge. He is willing to change his life in a minute. He sees an opportunity and he grabs it. And indeed, he actually marries Rabbi Yochanan's sister. He actually becomes a brother-in-law to Rabbi Yochanan. So now Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish are not just friends. They're not just chavrutas in the Beit Midrash. They are family. They are brothers-in-law. And they're very, very close. And the same energy that we've just seen in this first paragraph is going to exist the whole way through. The same energy of one answering the other and the other one having an answer for the next and then throwing it back and throwing it again. We'll see this the whole way through. Okay, number 2. One time, the Chachamim were sitting in the Beit Midrash and they got into an argument, as you do when you're sitting in the Beit Midrash. Hasaif v'hasakin v'hapidyon v'haromach u'magal yad u'magal katzir me'etai mekablin tuma mish'ad gamar malachatam. They get into a really interesting conversation, which is halachic by nature, but we're telling a story about the halacha. We're not actually giving the halacha here. We're having a story about the halacha. And if you look at the sources, you can see that I've put in a spear, I've put in a sword, I've put in a dagger, I've put in a sheath. These are all different types of blades. And the question is, at what point does a blade become a finished product that can receive tumah, that becomes impure, ritually impure? Now, this was really relevant in those times because if you had a Beit Mikdash, you could not go to the Holy Temple if you weren't pure. So it was very important to know when your weapons, when your objects were tahor, pure, or when they were tumah, where they were tmeim, when they were impure. And it was very important to know. And it was put out there that the weapon or the blade or the sheath or the dagger, they only can receive tumah if it's finished, if they are finalized, if they are done, if they are ready for use. And the question then has to be asked, What do you think the question is? Does anyone have an idea for what the question is? The question is, when is it really finished? When would you say that the weapon is finished? Now, I don't know if any of you have seen any programs on TV. We don't live with blacksmiths anymore, but does anyone remember the blacksmith? Do you remember that process? Do you have anything in your head about how you make a weapon or something made of metal, a sword? What would you say is involved? Anybody want to help me there?
You have to melt it.
That's right. You have to melt the metal in the furnace. What happens after that?
You've got to beat it.
It gets beaten. Yeah, you do this all like bang, 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 bang. And then you turn it over, you put it back into the heat, and then you see it like the color. Yeah, Sandy, what did you want to say?
Yeah, the final thing that happens is it's plunged into a bucket of water.
Wow, that is fantastic, Sandy. And you have read this Gemara before.
No, I've seen it in the movies.
You've seen it in the movies. So that is excellent, because that's exactly what I saw in the movies, and I remember exactly that. And that is exactly the discussion that happens between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. They get into a lovely fight, and they say, Rabbi Yochanan says, Mishitzarfam bekivshan, like my mom said. Rabbi Yochanan is my mom, and Rabbi Yochanan says when it gets burned in the furnace. And Reish Lakish is actually Sandy. And Reish Lakish says, from that moment that they're plunged into the water and the metal takes on its final shape. That's really when it happens. Okay. I wish I could just go in and in and in. Okay, but I'm gonna put it out here already right now. Does anybody have any let's put it this way, there's always the context and there's the subcontext. Does anybody here have any sense perhaps that there's a context and a subcontext? I don't want to suggest perhaps what we might be also talking about when we talk about this weapon, where the weapon is Makabel Tuma, but also this whole concept of when it's finished, when is an object finished? What could we also perhaps be discussing here on a subcontext?
Is it knowledge? No.
Something to do with knowledge, yeah?
Yeah.
Definitely something to do with knowledge. Great, Norma, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah, and I'm not sure what else.
Okay, so I'm going to bring up something, and perhaps you're going to see it in a minute. I hope you will as well. But first of all, I'm going to go back to the first. I'm just going to do a little break here for a second, and I'm going to go back to the beginning when I told you that Rabbi Yochanan, who was in the water, but then Reish Lakish jumped into the water. Okay, and I'm also going to say that Rabbi Yochanan says, if you come back and do tshuva, you will take my sister to be your wife. And Reish Lakish accepts the challenge. And when he wants to go back to the river bed to go and get his weapons that he left behind on the side of the river, suddenly he's not able to. He's taken on this challenge. He's taken on this chozer b'tshuva, and he can't go back. Can anybody explain to me why this strong, big man who's potentially had a background of being a gladiator, why could he not go back to get his weapons after accepting the challenge of Rabbi Yochanan to be chozer b'tshuva? What do you think it means? Which is what we're talking about when we discuss Agadah. The beauty of Agadah is that it has so many levels. Yeah. Who would like to share their thoughts?
Difficult one.
Because this is Shari here. Can you hear me?
I can see the top of your photo frame, so I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Oh,
now
sorry,
I can see your forehead. There we go.
Yes, because he'd taken on a new life. He'd taken on a completely new life, and he was not able to go back to the weapons were part of his old life. They were symbolic of the old life, but he'd left that. He'd gone away from that. He'd made this big decision through the water, which had purified him, as it were. So that's why he couldn't go back to it.
Excellent, amazing. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. That idea of taking the plunge means that when you really make a decision that you're determined about, when you really decide to dedicate yourself to a new direction. So to some extent, this is partially what the discussion is. Is a person set, or can people go on a journey and maybe Maybe they sometimes do waver. Maybe they do have moments. Or is it, as we saw from Reish Lakish, that he took on the plunge and he literally wasn't able to go and get his weapons because he had made this decision and he was now a new man. And this is how it carries on. As we said, Rabbi Yochanan being the furnace man, Reish Lakish being the water man. Amar lo Rabbi Yochanan lo Reish Lakish. And this is where we have a very sensitive moment about to happen. We're in the middle of a halachic discussion about when a weapon is officially a finished product and could receive tumah. And Rabbi Yochanan turns to Reish Lakish because the discussion is about swords and spears and a scythe and also daggers. And Rabbi Yochanan does something which I'm going to put it out there. For me, again, please don't think that I am being critical of a person, but I think this is something we're all familiar with, which isn't so considered okay. What am I about to say? Rabbi Yochanan says to Reish Lakish, listim belistiot yodea. A thief in his thievery should know. What did Rabbi Yochanan do in the height of the halachic discussion? This is all, of course, in the name of Torah. We're sitting in a Beit Midrash. We're having a discussion all about when a weapon can become tumah or not. One says the furnace, Rabbi Yochanan. One says the water, Reish Lakish. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Rabbi Yochanan says to Reish Lakish, well, a thief should know. What do you think of that? What does Sandy think of that?
It's kind of a horribly snide comment that, without being too rude about Rabbi Yochanan, he's saying, look, I know who you are, I know what you know, and I know why you know it. You used to be a thief, you used to use swords, you used to be a gladiator, you know all about this. And he's made it personal. He's made it a personal attack to try and win
He's
his
accusing
point.
him of still being a thief.
He's what's that has?
He's accusing him of still being a thief.
Wow, exactly. Between Sandy and Hess, that's exactly, Mrs. Hess, that's exactly what we're hearing here. We're hearing a place where a man is being reminded of a former lifestyle. It does feel snide, it feels uncomfortable, but what's also problematic is that it's almost suggesting that he has had a previous life and has he changed? And is it once again that a person perhaps maybe it's not an authentic Chazera b'tshuva? Maybe we're all still thieves underneath it all. What is Rabbi Yochanan saying to him? What is he suggesting? And this is exactly the type of comment that we know. We don't remind someone of a background, right? We don't say, oh, you in your former life. Or if we're privileged to meet somebody who perhaps was converted, that's considered such an incredible thing today. We don't go and say, oh, I remember you before. You don't take someone back to a previous place. You only give them encouragement. In fact, even encouragement to some extent, you've got to be careful, because encouragement could also be a reminder. So you've got to be extremely careful how you refer to someone. And ben adam l'chaveira, as we know, when we have the respect for one another, that's much higher than just having lots of Torah knowledge. Okay, so what do we have here? Amar Reish Lakish, and Reish Lakish now turns to him. And again, remember, we are talking about two chevrutas, two brothers-in-laws, two very close friends. And he says to him, Uma ho'altali, what are you trying to say? What have you done for me? Sham karuli Rebbe, there they called me master. V'kan korimli Rebbe, and now they call me master. And does anyone know what Reish Lakish is saying to Rabbi Yochanan? What does he mean? There they called me master, and now they call me master. What have you done for me? What's he saying to Rabbi Yochanan?
That he was a leader of the thieves or whoever he was with, but he's become a leader amongst the Hachomim.
Right. Right, exactly right. In other words, he's saying to Rabbi Yochanan, did you think I did this for status? Do you think I left my old life behind just so they'll call me Rebbe? That here I'll suddenly have everyone respecting me for my Torah knowledge? I was doing just fine in my old life. I was able to be a master. I was the Rebbe. I was the one everyone looked up to. And if you think I did it for status, then you're wrong. That's not the reason I've become a rabbi. The reason I've become a rabbi is because I recognized the truth. I literally plunged into the water and grabbed the opportunity that you offered me. And that is the reason why I am who I am today and where I am today. And if you think that it was just because I wanted to be a master, then you've done me wrong. Amar lo, ha'alti lecha, I have done some good for you, he says. Shekaravticha tachat kanfei shechina. At least give me credit that I'm the one who brought you closer to Hashem. So yes, it's true. Rabbi Yochanan definitely is the one who challenged Reish Lakish to step up to the moment of decision of becoming a Rav. But it's very interesting that neither of them is letting go. Neither of them is willing to back down. But we all of a sudden see that Reish Lakish doesn't respond anymore. Rabbi Yochanan says the first denigrating comment to Reish Lakish about being a thief and a bandit. Reish Lakish says, if you think it was about status, then you're wrong. I'm a master in both worlds, and I know why I'm here. And Rabbi Yochanan may be realizing that he's made a very big error, reminding Reish Lakish of his past, and therefore maybe he says, well, at least recognize that I'm the one who brought you back to Hashem. Please at least give me that credit, because I've just made a big fool of myself. Or he's back up on the fight and he's saying to him, at least recognize that I'm the one who has caused your behavior. Now, that's important that Rabbi Yochanan is saying he is the one that shaped Reish Lakish. Why is it relevant for Rabbi Yochanan to tell Reish Lakish that he is the one who shaped him? How does that match what we learned about the weapons?
Well, he shaped him as... Sorry. Because he actually shaped him. He actually formed him as you form a weapon. He formed him. And it seems to me that this is his way of apologizing. He says, well, at least give me that credit. I'm sorry I said that, but look at it from that point of view, that I've brought you here. I think that's how, well, that's one way of looking at it.
Definitely. I definitely think that Rabbi Yochanan is saying, and we know this to be true of Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. Rabbi Yochanan's opinion is the furnace is when the piece is completed. The furnace is when the weapon is ready, when it is possible to use it. But Sandy says we all know that there's actually another step. The step is not the furnace as the final piece. The bucket of water is the final piece. So what we're now saying, and Rabbi Yochanan is saying it, Reish Lakish is also saying it, it's not just about those who shape you, it's also about something else. What is it that Reish Lakish does, or what is it about the sword in the cold water? What is that final piece? What is happening in the process that is specifically created by the plunging in the water bit? What could that mean? Miriam, what do you think?
Is that like a graduation?
It is like a graduation. Of what kind though? What do we think the water is doing to the weapon?
It's toiling in. Is it kashering in?
That's very much true. There's a purity process, right? Exactly as Reish Lakish jumped into the water, right? And comes out pure and ready to learn Torah.
Yes.
We can say that it's being plunged into water and it's going through some sort of purification. But what else is happening to the metal? What do we think is happening to the metal?
It becomes hard.
Reason.
It hardens it.
Hard, yes. What else?
It's a different reason for its use.
Right.
To be used for a better reason.
Look, I would say that they can both be used, but we're saying that the sword is set. It becomes hardened. It becomes ready to be used in a way that it becomes almost determined, more determined.
That sets its character.
That's what sets it, exactly. And it's very interesting that Reish Lakish is basically saying to Rabbi Yochanan, of course I give you credit for shaping me. Of course I appreciate that you were the one who brought out my initial shape. But at the point that the water surrounds the boiling metal, and you hear that as the sword goes into the water, there's something that's happening to the sword itself that becomes clear, it becomes sharp, it becomes ready for action. It's determined, it knows what it has to do. And I think that Reish Lakish here is telling Rabbi Yochanan, whilst I do appreciate the role you played in my life shaping me, the ma'aseh, the action, has to come from me. I have to become hardened in the role that I'm playing. I had to use my bechira chofshit, my free choice. I have to know it's 20 to 11.
You've got time, you're okay.
A little bit of time. Okay. I have to decide what I want to do. And Reish Lakish is telling Rabbi Yochanan, remember, you challenged me, but I used my free choice to pick up the challenge. You shaped me by bringing me into the Beit Midrash, but I chose to stay there. And it even says about Rabbi Yochanan, it says, Rabbi Yochanan, Reish Lakish, it says, Reish Lakish says, if you see a student to whom his studies are as hard as iron, this is in Talmud Bavli, in Tanit, it is because he has failed to systemize his studies. And one, do not whet the edge. What is his remedy? Let him attend the school even more regularly. Then must he put more strength. But wisdom is profitable to direct. And another one in Talmud Bavli says, one who saw Reish Lakish in the Beit Midrash engaged in debate would think that he was uprooting mountains and grinding them against each other. This was a man who didn't stop. He was constantly invigorating his learning. He was constantly engaged in trying to get to the truth. He wasn't just shaped by others. And then when the other walks away, when Rabbi Yochanan would walk away, then Reish Lakish would turn back into a bandit. Oh no, we're talking about a person who was very clear about his choices, very clear about his decisions. He was for sure shaped by Rabbi Yochanan. He would be the last person not to acknowledge the role that Rabbi Yochanan played in his life. But at the end of the day, Rabbi Yochanan is making a significant mistake, assuming that it's only the furnace that shapes the man. It's beyond the furnace. It's also that moment where the person chooses for himself a new lifestyle and a new direction. And now we're going into the next paragraph. Rabbi Yochanan's mind becomes weak, and Chala Reish Lakish, and Reish Lakish's body becomes ill. Now notice again, who gets what? Rabbi Yochanan, who is the man of the mind, who believes in shaping the other. His mind goes weak. Rabbi Yochanan, who was big and strong and made these decisions, becomes actually physically ill. The wife of Reish Lakish runs to Rabbi Yochanan and cries to him. Who is the wife of Reish Lakish?
The sister. She's his sister.
Excellent, the sister. And she says, Aseh bishvil banai, do something just for my children's sake. Amar la, he says to her, Azvai tomech ani achayeh. Rabbi Yochanan uses a pasuk to try and comfort his sister and says, don't worry about the orphans, I will support them, meaning Hashem will support the orphans. That's the type of language that Rabbi Yochanan is trying to comfort his sister, who is crying that her husband is mortally ill. And he's using Yirmiyah to as if use a pasuk of Torah or a pasuk from Tanakh to support his sister. Okay, this is a very odd situation. Who goes into an intellectual place when you're watching your wife's husband, who also happens to be your best friend and your chavruta? Who says an intellectual comment using a pasuk to try and comfort your very own sister? Don't worry about the orphans. And then she carries on and she says, I say bishvil almonati, but then think, if you're not going to think of my kids, think of me. I'm going to become a widow. What are you doing? Amarnov almonatayich alai tiftachu. And again he quotes Jeremiah and he says, in your widower, you must rely on me. These are the things that Rabbi Yochanan does when his sister is going through this terrible, terrible experience of watching her husband become more and more ill. Again, the Gemara is definitely criticizing Rabbi Yochanan here, because what he's doing is he's hiding behind the mask of Torah as if helping his sister. Don't worry, rely on me, rely on Hashem, have faith, it's going to be okay. He's using Torah, but in a way he should be recognizing that he is the cause that his brother-in-law is so ill. He is the one who insulted his brother-in-law. He is the one who reminded his brother-in-law of his previous life. And it's from there, when Reish Lakish feels that Rabbi Yochanan is questioning his Chazarah b'tshuva, Reish Lakish becomes sick. And it's very sad that Rabbi Yochanan is hiding behind Psukim of Torah as if to calm his sister. And the very last line of that particular paragraph is, Umeit Rav Shimon ben Lakish. Rav Shimon ben Lakish is no longer called Reish Lakish. In the moment that he dies, he is given the full title, Rav Shimon ben Lakish. That is his full title and name. He dies as a great rabbi. He dies as a recognized Talmid Chacham. He dies in the Beit Midrash. He's not in the Beit Midrash, but he dies as a member of the Beit Midrash. Okay, this is obviously a very tragic story. Unfortunately, it doesn't improve. But again, I'm not just using this because it's a yurt site, but I'm talking here about this idea of two beloved people, two people who loved each other very deeply, two people who really sparked each other and were best chavrutot. And in fact, this is exactly what we see, that Rabbi Yochanan is besides himself. Haya Rabbi Yochanan mitzta'eh acharav harbeh. He was besides himself. He was grieving in a most terrible way, because it's really hit him that he's made a terrible error, reminding his brother-in-law of a previous life. We see that the Gemara already uses a full title, which is just a proof to us that Rabbi Shimon was exactly as he claimed to be, someone who joined the world of Torah because he was an authentic Jew and not because he was looking to master one world and master the next. He was mastering the world of bandits and mastering the world of Torah. He wasn't in it to master, he was in it to learn Torah and debate on a high level. La yarad lebeit avad, and it seems that Rabbi Yochanan was so grieving that he would not go to the Beit Mikdash, or he would not go to the committee house to be part of the discussions. Amru Chachamim, the Chachamim noticed this, and the Chachamim say, Mi yelech laniach dato, who can go to calm him down? He's besides himself, he's losing his mind. Who will go and calm this man? Yelech Rav Elazar ben Pedat sheshmuotav mechudadot. They say, we know, we have an idea. We are going to send Rav Elazar ben Pedat, who is rumored to be absolutely mechudad. Does anybody know what mechudad means, or what the word chad means?
Sharp.
Perfect. Okay, the word mechudad should not be lost on anyone, because our entire discussion has been about weapons and blades and sharpness and Torah learning and the chavruta between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. And so what do the Chachamim come to a natural conclusion? He's lost his chavruta, he's losing his mind. We've got to find someone who's incredibly sharp, who will challenge him once again and bring him to his senses. And Rav Elazar ben Pedat, being a good man, does exactly that. He comes and sits with Rabbi Yochanan. Everything that Rabbi Yochanan said, Amar lo Rav Elazar ben Pedat, Tanya dimisaya lach. He basically says straight away, he sits with him and he says, everything you say is excellent. Okay, he says, your every dictum, everything that you say, there is a brighter, there is oral Torah that supports your argument. Okay, so we know that Rav Elazar ben Pedat is so brilliant that every time Rabbi Yochanan comes up with an idea, a suggestion, a halachic question, Rav Elazar ben Padat can say, yep, there is an opinion like that. Yep, there's an opinion like that. Yep, you're right. There's one like that in the Gemara. And what does that do for Rabbi Yochanan? Does anybody imagine what that does for Rabbi Yochanan? Any suggestions? What does that do for Rabbi Yochanan?
He feels superior. He feels more superior. No.
You think he feels superior? Interesting. Okay. Well, anyone else?
He's very disappointed. He's disappointed because the sharpness of his arguments with Resh Lakish weren't through agreement, but through disagreement.
Oh, marvelous, Mrs. Hass. That was excellent.
That's good. Also that.
Okay, exactly that. A chavruta. How many of us like a yes man, and how many of us like to have our brains challenged? Just a little bit. Okay. Do you want someone to constantly agree with you and go, yes, 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 you're brilliant. Oh, that was fantastic. Oh my goodness, I've never met such a bright mind. Fabulous. Or do you want someone who comes back at you and gives you aerobics in the mind and the brain, keeps your brain stimulated, keeps you on your toes? Someone who's going to question, not in order to make a point to bring you down, but someone who's going to stimulate you and make you think. And that's exactly what Rabbi Yochanan says. Amar lo Rabbi Yochanan, ata keven Lakish, are you like Ben Lakish? Ben Lakish, kashayiti omer davar, Ben Lakish, when I would say something to him, haya maksheli. He would come with a kushiyah. He would find difficulty with what I said. Esrim v'arba kushiyot, each time 24 difficulties at least. And I would bring back 24 different responses. And we would sharpen our understanding of the discussion, and we would reach higher and higher truths. So you can imagine them sitting in the Beit Midrash. One says one thing, the other one comes back and disagrees, the other one comes back and brings another argument, the other one comes back. By the end of the evening, they go home, they feel their brains are bursting from discussion. The debate is so sharp and wonderful. And Rabbi Yochanan is rather than being comforted by this Rav Ben Padat, unfortunately, it only further emphasizes how much he misses his brother-in-law, how much he misses his best friend. He misses that voice, the company of a person he loved. He misses the person who was there by his side. It's so meaningful. It makes me cry. Anyway, it really makes you realize how important it is to have that person in your life who really brings to you that sharp discussion. And he carries on, and he actually says, something also fabulous. Oh, how wonderful what you say. What do you think? I don't know what I said is beautiful. Okay, it's even more painful. Rabbi Yochanan knows he's right. He knows he's smart. But when we spoke about Ben Padat, we spoke about Mechudad Sharp. But look what happens here. Don't I know that I said something beautiful? Who's the beautiful one in our story?
Rabbi Yochanan.
B'diuk. Rabbi Yochanan is the beautiful one. He doesn't need someone to tell him he's beautiful. He doesn't need someone to tell him his Torah is beautiful. He's beautiful. The world knows Rabbi Yochanan is beautiful. They thought he was a woman. He was so beautiful. Okay? Amad v'karad begadav v'bacha. He stands up, he rips his clothes, and he starts to cry. V'amar, and he says, Heichan ata ben Lakish. Heichan ata ben Lakish. Where are you, Ben Lakish? Where are you? Hayat Zoek, he was crying, Volech, and walking backwards and forwards, Ad shenitrafa alav da'ato, until his very mind is completely lost. Bikshu alav chachamim rachamim v'met. And the chachamim see that this man is tormented in his grieving. He's tormented from the sadness of losing this dear, close, and wonderful person in his life. And the Chachamim realize the only way forward is to put him out of his misery. They actually daven, they ask mercy on him, and that he should die. And that is the end of a tragic, tragic story. It's a very harsh story. I'm sorry to leave you without turning it into a Hollywood and making it all better.
I didn't live happily ever after.
But I think that there's something very deep about what we're saying here, that we don't need to make everything better in life. Sometimes it's very important to look at the story as it is, to recognize a tragedy as a tragedy, to be able to understand that two people who are so close to each other, you still have to be sensitive. You still, even if it's in the name of Torah, you can't put another person down. You can't take a person and doubt him in his authenticity. And I think that Rabbi Yochanan isn't just mourning Reish Lakish, he's mourning that he allowed himself to get to a place where he slipped in such a bad way, and he slipped in the name of Torah, which is really much more severe. It's not just reminding someone, but Ki'ilu in the name of Torah. So this is why I wanted to take it back to the very beginning of the road to character, the idea of us all building our character, the idea of us having these two almost conflicting roles, the role of our closeness to Hashem, the role of being successful. In this story, we do have a little bit of a discussion of Torah versus status, the status of becoming a great rabbi, but really knowing that underneath it wasn't about that at all for Reish Lakish. He was an authentic man. He also says something unbelievable. If I could just quickly find it for you, I hope I can quickly find it for you. He said, yes, Bereshit Rabbah, Rabbi Yochanan likened it to a daughter of a priest who was divorced and can never return to her husband. Rav Shimon ben Lakish likened it to a daughter of an Israelite who was divorced and one can one day return to her husband. This is about Adam, the Chet. After the Chet happened, after Adam ate from the tree, Rabbi Yochanan felt that it was like the daughter of a priest who was divorced, and a daughter of a Kohen who is divorced cannot go back to her husband. So my husband is a Kohen, Baruch Hashem, and I always tell him not to get too angry at me, because if he sends me away, he cannot have me back. So he better know what he's doing when he gets into a bad temper, because he'll just have to regret it afterwards. Whereas Rav Shimon ben Lakish, he believes that the Chet of Adam is likened to the daughter of an Israelite, a Ben Yisrael, who was divorced, and he can take back his wife. What do we see even here? The Rabbi Yochanan says you do one thing and there's no return, and Reish Lakish says no, people can fix themselves, they can change, they can be chozer b'tshuva. You don't just have a one-way street in life. It's never too late to do tshuva. And I'm going to add this now, just take it to also Parshat Vayikra, also Pesach. Taking a note out of another great rabbi who unfortunately we've lost recently is Rabbi Twersky, who was an incredible psychiatrist and also the son of a Rebbe who had his own Admor, an Admor who had his own Chatzer. What time is it? 5 minutes. And basically, he says very clearly that we all know that Rabbi Twersky dealt with addictions all the time. He was constantly helping people who unfortunately were affected by either chemicals, drugs, gambling, pornography. He was dealing with all of that. He was an incredible, incredible man. He based one of his books. In fact, he says he wrote 40 books, but all about the same topic. And he often used the Alcoholics Anonymous. He used also the steps, and he turned it into a more Jewish format. But an unbelievable man. And he said today as well, we have to think of ourselves as a Pesach, that it's a time in Nisan of Yetziat Mitzrayim. In Mitzrayim, we were avadim. We had no free choice. We had no free time. We could not determine our futures. We could not decide what we wanted for ourselves. We see that Reish Lakish was free. Was a free man. He could decide. He was able to free himself. He was able to let go of his past, and he was able to choose a better future. And I would like to say that for all of us, this coming Pesach should be exactly that, an opportunity for us to rid ourselves of the chametz, rid ourselves of the bad habits, rid ourselves of the things that unfortunately sometimes control us instead of us controlling them. And to that extent, we remain servants. If we are still controlled by outside impacting things, if we're still, impacted by the fire and not taking control and taking charge of our own lives and making our own choices and decisions to take a higher level and look at life, using our free choice to improve our futures. And Bezrat Hashem, We should recognize that we all have it within us to plunge into the water, go through a process of tahara, and also come out determined and clear about what we want to say. I will finish by saying that my father was a man who lived off of debates. When he was in university, he was on the debating team, and he kindled in our minds as children the curiosity for discussion and intellectual stimulation. Our Shabbos table was alive with discussion, and his behavior exposed us to a wide spectrum of interest that opened our worlds, informed us of the world outside. He always felt that we must have a direct relationship with Hashem, and always believed that we shouldn't look at a malach, but rather we should always look towards Hashem and take responsibility for our actions. And Be'ezrat Hashem, we should all be zocher to having a sharp mind and having a wide spectrum of interests and continuously growing. And therefore, I would like to dedicate this shir to my father and thank my mother for being his partner for many, many years. Baruch Hashem. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
very much.
We wish you a richut yamim.
Thank you.
And the blessing of good memories.
Thank you.
Yes.
Can I just say,
I wish you a richut yamim, Rachel. Lovely to see you, and thank you so much for the share. And I wish you Chag Kasher v'Sameach.
Thank you.
Love.
Lots of love. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so many lovely people for joining us for something which was also a shiur, but also a little bit more personal. Yeah, Mom, you want to say something? Yeah.
Yeah, I want to just say we're going to have an official vote of thanks in a minute. I didn't get the opportunity at the beginning to actually welcome you and tell everybody a little bit about you personally, which is very important. And I want to say, Rachel not only went to Hasmo, she went to Mechlala. She's lived in Israel for 30 years, and Baruch Hashem, she's married to Noam, her wonderful husband, who's a Rav in the yeshiva. And she has 6 kids, plus 4 of them are now married, and we have 2 grandchildren. And please God, a new one after Pesach.
Please God. I just became a grandma. It's very exciting.
Yes, very exciting. And she teaches at Midrash Harova, which is the same in Yerushalayim. And she also recently completed a master's in art therapy, where she works in kindergarten for children in Israel. So she's very much her father's daughter. She's certainly got his intellect. And three of my kids have got masters, so they didn't get it from me, so they definitely got it from me. So thank you, Rachel, for that beautiful share. Pat, over to you.
I don't quite know where to start, everyone. Firstly, I would like to say, Rachel, thank you so much. It is such a tribute to your dear family that I noticed there were 34 people online this evening. I think that's a record. It's a tribute to your dear father, who, as you say, so liked discussions on such a wide variety of topics. It's a tribute to your dear mother, who organises the Rosh Chodesh group and has done for many years. And it's a tribute to you for giving the share. Thank you for telling us about Rabbi Yochanan and Rachel Lakish, the interaction, the lessons we learned from them, despite you saying it was a tragedy at the end. And by attending tonight, we all continue to learn and shape ourselves.
Amen,
so
amen.
Thank you very much indeed. It's not going to be an easy Pesach for all of us in the times that we're in, but I do wish everyone Chag Sameach.
Amen.
And be safe and well, everybody.
Yeah, well, you should all be well. Come to Israel because it's easing up here.
We can't stay. We can't get a flight.
I got my vaccination yesterday because we were sick with corona. We actually had corona, and after 3 months you were allowed to get your first vaccination. So I did it yesterday. So I'm a little bit fluey right now, but I took I dragged myself up, and thank God we made it through.
Kol hakavod. Kol hakavod. Thank you.
Very much,
Wonderful share.
Thank you very much.
Chag Kasher v'Sameach. Well done.
Thank you.
And arichat yamim. Arichat yamim.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you very
All the
much.
best, Riva.
Thank you.
Lots of
Thank you very
love.
much, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody for joining us.
Really very lovely.
Thank you, Reva.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you
for
for
coming.
everything.
Thank you, everybody,
Well
for being
done.
here.
Well
Thank you,
done.
Reva.
Wonderful.
Great.
Okay, all the best.
And to you.
Arichat Yamim. And I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you.
Good.
Please,
Lots of
God, I'm
love.
sorry I didn't get a chance to call you back today. Thank you.
Don't
for ringing.
worry. No. Plenty of time.
Okay.
That must be tough.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's been a very special evening for me and my family. And then carry on Shabbos. This is your Saturday in the evening. My kids have arranged already 2 shiurim, and Benji's arranged something. One of his ex-professors is